Me watching her scream after I poured boiling water on her after she told a boy happy birthday because why you happy, he made it another year.
Don't be shy, don't be shy. Don't be shy.
Yeah, that was my girlfriend. That was somebody who I was exploiting, but I didn't kill her, bro.
When investigators discovered the dismembered remains of 15-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez inside a Tesla registered to rising music star David Burke, the world thought it was just another tragic murder case. But then came the twist no one expected. Authorities began digging through David's TikTok history, and what they uncovered wasn't random dark humor or edgy memes. It was a disturbing digital breadcrumb trail, a series of reposts and captions that looked less like jokes and more like a public confession. From violent memes about jealousy, to chilling Hello Kitty references tied directly to Celeste, to cryptic posts about missing her after she disappeared, David's TikTok feed may have revealed his true mindset long before anyone found the body. And now, the FBI believes these posts weren't coincidences. They were clues hiding in plain sight, linking one of music's fastest rising stars to one of the most disturbing cases in years. David Burke, better known as D4vd, wasn't just another musician climbing the charts. He was a viral phenomenon. His songs like Romantic Homicide and Here With Me turned him into a TikTok darling, with millions of young fans reposting his tracks and flooding their feeds with edits. On the surface, it looked like the dream rise of a DIY artist. But beneath the carefully crafted image, investigators say his own reposts painted a far darker story. While fans thought they were seeing edgy humor or relatable heartbreak, detectives now argue that David's feed was a blueprint for murder, a public diary of violent jealousy and obsession that mirrored Celeste's fate almost exactly. Posts about chopping meat, mocking funerals, graphic movie clips tied to betrayal, each one, in hindsight, reads less like random internet content and more like a systematic confession hiding in plain sight. It wasn't just dark humor. It was a disturbing insight into the mind of someone who, investigators believe, was documenting his fantasies before making them reality. And the more they looked, the clearer the pattern became. The first post that caught investigators' attention was chilling in its simplicity. David had reposted a meme of someone chopping raw chicken, captioned, "Me if I see her talking with other dudes." At first glance, most people might brush it off as toxic jealousy, the kind of dark humor that floods TikTok every day. But when you compare it to how Celeste's body was discovered, dismembered inside David's Tesla, that meme hits like a roadmap. It wasn't just a joke, it was a warning, and it didn't stop there. David also reposted the infamous American Psycho nail gun scene, captioning it, "Me after hearing about her past with other boys. I'm jealous and utterly disgusted by her actions." Taken alone, these might look like edgy internet posts. But together, they mirrored the exact mindset investigators believe fueled his obsession with Celeste. Jealousy, disgust, violence, all spelled out online, months before the crime ever came to light. Detectives now argue that these weren't random posts. They were digital breadcrumbs leading straight into the heart of the case. The deeper investigators dug into David's TikTok activity, the harder it became to dismiss his reposts as just edgy humor. A clear pattern began to emerge, one that revealed an escalating obsession with violence, control, and death. He had reposts about killing romantic partners, jokes about mock funerals, and disturbing clips that glorified mental breakdowns. Each piece of content might have looked like a throwaway joke to his millions of followers, but together they formed a systematic record of violent fantasies. Online discussions now describe these posts as fetishizing murder, turning violence into entertainment, long before Celeste's body was ever discovered. And when investigators compared the tone of these posts to the details of Celeste's death, the parallels were impossible to ignore. It wasn't just that David consumed dark content, it was that he seemed to use his TikTok as a public diary, documenting his mindset step by step as fantasy turned into reality. This wasn't a single bad joke, it was a curriculum of violence, and every repost was another chapter. If the violent memes weren't disturbing enough, one detail on David's TikTok sent investigators into overdrive: his profile picture. At the time, it featured a bloody, blindfolded Hello Kitty. At first, it might seem like nothing more than a creepy, edgy aesthetic, but then came the discovery. Celeste loved Hello Kitty. She was last seen wearing Hello Kitty sandals, carrying a Hello Kitty keychain, and her family described the character as one of her absolute favorites. To detectives, this wasn't a coincidence. It looked like a twisted trophy. David putting his victim's favorite character front and center on his TikTok, mocking her memory in plain sight. But it went even deeper. Back in February 2024, David posted a TikTok with the caption, "When your card declines at therapy and they bring in that one Hello Kitty girl you met in 2021. Investigators now believe this was a veiled reference to Celeste, suggesting he had met her online years earlier when she was only 11. What once looked like a random meme now reads like a confession hidden in plain sight, a predator documenting the early stages of his grooming process while millions scrolled past. The Hello Kitty connection transformed this case from disturbing to chilling, revealing just how calculated David's online presence really was. Among all the violent memes and twisted captions, one repost stood out as especially haunting. Not long after Celeste disappeared, David shared a simple, almost understated message: "I miss her." On its own, the phrase could be read as a typical expression of heartbreak. But when investigators placed it against the timeline of Celeste's disappearance and later the discovery of her body in David's Tesla, the meaning shifted into something far more sinister. Detectives now believe this wasn't David grieving or longing. It was him taunting, dropping a cryptic hint that he knew exactly where Celeste was, because her remains were hidden in his car. Combined with the violent memes he posted around the same time, the "I miss her" repost painted a chilling picture. David wasn't just documenting fantasies. He was broadcasting his guilt in plain sight, treating the murder as if it were part of some twisted performance for his audience. It was the kind of sociopathic behavior investigators usually associate with serial killers: the need to brag, to leave behind clues, and to hide confessions in everyday language that only makes sense once the truth comes out. David's biggest hit, Romantic Homicide, once sounded like just another heartbreak anthem, raw, emotional, and relatable to millions of fans. But in the wake of Celeste's death, investigators began to see the song in a completely different light. Lyrics that once felt like poetic exaggeration now read like a confession set to music. The pain, the jealousy, the fixation on violence, all of it seemed to echo the same disturbing emotions that drove David's TikTok reposts. And the timeline makes it even more damning. Detectives confirmed that many of these songs and posts dated back months, even years before Celeste's body was discovered. This wasn't a sudden outburst of violence. It looked like premeditation, carefully disguised as art and hidden behind the mask of an edgy musician. What fans once celebrated as authenticity may have actually been David putting his darkest truths into plain sight and profiting from them. For investigators, it raised a chilling question. Had David been confessing all along, but the world mistook it for creativity? Behind the headlines and TikTok evidence was a real teenager with her whole future ahead of her. Celeste Rivas Hernandez was only 15 when she was found, but her connection to David stretched back years. Investigators believe Celeste and David first crossed paths online in 2021 when she was just 11. What may have started as casual interaction gradually turned into a troubling pattern, documented through Discord chats, TikTok reposts, and cryptic memes. Celeste's family described her as bright, funny, and full of life. She loved Hello Kitty, had a bubbly personality, and was cherished as a daughter, sister, cousin, and friend. But she was also keeping a secret: contact with someone much older who presented himself as David. She was officially reported missing in April 2024 at just 13 years old. At the time, some thought it might have been another runaway situation since she had left home before, but investigators now suspect those disappearances may have been linked to her ongoing communication with David. By the time her body was discovered in September 2025, detectives had pieced together a devastating timeline. While David was building his music career and public image, he was allegedly forming a hidden connection with a vulnerable teenager. And when that timeline was compared to David's online activity, the parallels became impossible to ignore. The most chilling part of this case isn't just the TikTok trail. It's the way the physical and digital evidence lined up perfectly with what investigators already suspected. The first undeniable link came from the tattoos. Both Celeste and David had the same design inked on their right index fingers. Hers in red ink matched David's placement exactly. To investigators, this wasn't coincidence. It was a mark of ownership, a predator branding his victim. Celeste's family confirmed the tattoo detail, something police had never released publicly. Then came the digital trail. Screenshots from David's Discord server showed interactions with Celeste dating back to when she was just 11. These weren't casual fan conversations. They revealed years of grooming behavior, messages that slowly broke down boundaries, isolated her from support, and deepened his control. Perhaps most disturbing was an unreleased track titled Celeste Demo, recorded in late 2023. The lyrics contained unnerving references to tattoos, obsession, and possession, words investigators now see as a direct reflection of his relationship with her. What fans might have brushed off as metaphor, detectives now believe was a confession hiding in plain sight, and it wasn't just online. Photos and live streams surfaced of David with a girl who strongly resembled Celeste at Los Angeles events in 2023, proving that their connection wasn't limited to digital spaces. Every piece of evidence, the tattoos, the Discord logs, the unreleased music, the photos, told the same story. Celeste wasn't just a fan. She was trapped in David's world long before her body was discovered. On September 8th, 2025, workers at a Hollywood tow yard noticed something strange about an abandoned black Tesla that had been sitting for days. At first, it was the smell, a sharp, overwhelming stench that only grew worse the longer the car remained. When LAPD officers opened the front trunk, they were met with a sight that would haunt them forever: the decomposed, dismembered remains of a teenage girl stuffed inside a bag. The car was quickly traced back to David Burke. The location of the Tesla only deepened suspicions. It had been abandoned in the Hollywood Hills, just a short walk from the luxury rental property where David had been staying. Neighbors even reported seeing the same black Tesla parked outside for weeks at a time, sometimes with visible damage. The condition of Celeste's body told its own horrifying story. The level of decomposition suggested she had been dead for months. The dismemberment matched the grotesque themes of David's TikTok reposts almost exactly, from the chicken meme to the American Psycho clip. While David kept touring the country, performing on stage and posting online, Celeste's remains were rotting in his Tesla, hidden in plain sight, as if her life and death were nothing more than another part of his disturbing narrative. From the very beginning, detectives realized this wasn't a sloppy crime of passion. Everything about Celeste's murder appeared calculated. The Tesla wasn't dumped randomly. It was left in the Hollywood Hills, just blocks from where David had been staying. Close enough for him to monitor the situation, but far enough to feign distance. The car sat abandoned for nearly a week before being towed, with David maintaining his tour schedule the entire time. This raised disturbing questions. Was Celeste killed right before he left for tour, giving him the perfect excuse to be elsewhere while her body decomposed? Was the location chosen to deliberately mislead investigators? As for motive, theories vary. Some point to jealousy. David's own reposts showed fixation on Celeste talking to other boys. Others believe he feared a pregnancy scare or the career-ending fallout of being linked to a minor. But detectives suspect something darker still, that David derived pleasure from the psychological control, the grooming, and ultimately the violence itself. The evidence paints the portrait of someone who didn't just commit a crime, but someone who carefully orchestrated it step by step while performing for fans on a global stage. Just 10 days after Celeste's body was discovered, the investigation reached its breaking point. On September 18, 2025, the LAPD and FBI descended on a luxury rental property in the Hollywood Hills directly tied to David. Neighbors described the scene as a full-scale raid. Detectives in suits, forensic teams hauling equipment, and crime scene techs moving in and out of the house late into the night. And this wasn't just any location. The property sat only blocks away from where David's Tesla had been abandoned. Inside, investigators weren't looking for random evidence. They came prepared. Forensic teams sprayed luminol across drains, carpets, and hidden corners, a chemical that glows when it reacts to even trace amounts of blood. Detectives walked out carrying computers, hard drives, and multiple bags of evidence, each one potentially holding the key to the case. Modern homes like this often have extensive security camera systems, and investigators were determined to find out who had been at the residence and when. Digital evidence, from deleted files to GPS logs, was just as crucial as any DNA. The raid wasn't just about gathering evidence, it was a public declaration. This was no longer being treated as a suspicious death. It was being investigated as a homicide with David at the center. Images of law enforcement leaving the property with boxes of evidence spread like wildfire online, instantly changing the public's perception. The rising star who once symbolized DIY success was now being seen as the subject of a federal investigation. The Hollywood Hills raid didn't just shake law enforcement, it sent shockwaves through the entire music industry. The first signs came almost immediately. David abruptly canceled his Seattle show, the first in a string of cancellations that would wipe out his entire U.S. tour. Millions in ticket sales were refunded, venues were left scrambling, and fans who had packed arenas just days earlier were stunned into silence. Then the industry itself began pulling away. David had been scheduled for a Grammy Museum appearance, a milestone event that would have cemented his place among music's rising elite. But overnight, his name vanished from the lineup, quietly scrubbed from the official website. His label, Interscope Records, slammed the brakes on all promotion. The highly anticipated deluxe edition of his debut album, Withered, was shelved indefinitely. Even his online store wasn't safe. Merchandise featuring blood-themed designs was pulled after fans pointed out how disturbingly it mirrored the investigation. And then came the corporate retreat. Brands like Crocs and Hollister, once eager to cash in on his viral appeal, immediately suspended their partnerships, erasing him from campaigns as if he had never existed. In a matter of days, David went from headlining arenas to being blacklisted across the industry. What had taken years of relentless grind and viral success to build was unraveling faster than anyone could believe. The message was clear: in music, reputation is everything. And David's was collapsing in real time. What makes this case so groundbreaking isn't just the horror of Celeste's death, it's how investigators built their case. For decades, homicide investigations focused on physical evidence, fingerprints, DNA, witness testimony. But David's TikTok activity forced detectives to recognize something new: that social media itself can serve as a digital confession. Every repost, every caption, every profile change told a piece of the story. The violent memes about jealousy lined up with the cause of death. The Hello Kitty references mirrored Celeste's favorite character. The cryptic "I miss her" post appeared right after she vanished. Even his hit song, Romantic Homicide, now reads like a diary entry disguised as music. What once looked like random dark humor became a roadmap of premeditation, a breadcrumb trail investigators used to piece together David's mindset leading up to the murder. The case has already shifted how law enforcement views TikTok, Discord, and other online platforms. No longer just background noise, these digital trails are now treated as primary evidence, windows into a suspect's psychology that can reveal planning, motive, and intent long before a crime is solved. David's downfall has become a disturbing reminder: sometimes the clues aren't hidden at all. They're posted, shared, and liked by millions, waiting for someone to pay attention. At the heart of this case is a devastating truth. Celeste Rivas Hernandez was only 15 years old, a daughter, a sister, a friend, a young girl who loved Hello Kitty and should have had her whole life ahead of her. Instead, her story became intertwined with one of the darkest scandals the music world has ever seen. David Burke's rise was built on TikTok, and in the end, it may have been TikTok that exposed him. His own reposts weren't just edgy content, they were a roadmap to murder, breadcrumbs that investigators believed documented every stage of his obsession. The tragedy of Celeste's death is also a warning. In the digital age, predators no longer hide in the shadows. They hide in plain sight, behind memes, captions, and viral songs that millions scroll past without realizing the danger. For Celeste's family, no investigation or industry fallout will ever be enough. They are left grieving a daughter stolen from them far too soon. But for the rest of us, her story is a stark reminder. When red flags appear online, we cannot afford to dismiss them as just dark humor, because sometimes those posts aren't jokes at all. Sometimes they're confessions,